The wind howled like a wounded beast through the skeletal branches of the forest, whipping snow into frenzied spirals that stung Elena's face like tiny needles. She had been alone for weeks now, ever since the blizzard sealed off the mountain pass, turning her remote cabin into a frozen prison. The world outside was a vast, white void, indifferent to her plight. At 35, Elena had always prided herself on her independence, a former park ranger who knew the woods like the lines on her palms, but this winter tested her in ways she never imagined. Food rations dwindled to scraps of dried meat and a few cans of beans. Firewood was running low, and the cold seeped through the cracks in the walls, gnawing at her bones. Survival wasn't just about enduring, it was a relentless battle against despair. She woke that morning to a silence so profound it felt unnatural. The storm had finally broken, leaving behind a crisp, biting clarity in the air. Her breath fogged the small window as she peered out. The snow lay in deep drifts, blanketing the landscape in an unbroken sheet that sparkled under the weak sun. Hunger clawed at her stomach, a constant companion now. She couldn't stay holed up any longer. She had to forage, risk the elements for whatever the forest might offer. Berries were long gone, buried under ice, and small game had burrowed deep. But perhaps roots, or bark, anything to stave off the weakness creeping into her limbs. Bundling herself in layers, wool socks, thermal pants, a heavy coat patched with duct tape, Elena strapped on her snowshoes and grabbed her axe. The door creaked open, releasing a puff of warm air that vanished instantly in the chill. Stepping out, she sank slightly despite the shoes, the snow crunching underfoot. The forest loomed ahead, a maze of evergreens dusted white, their needles heavy with frost. She trudged forward, her path guided by instinct and faint memories of summer trails. Hours passed. The sun climbed higher, but the cold remained unyielding. Her muscles ached, and doubt whispered in her ear, what if she got lost? What if she collapsed out here, becoming just another frozen relic? By midday, exhaustion forced her to rest against a fallen log. She sipped from her canteen, the water icy against her teeth. That's when she noticed it, a faint, sweet scent cutting through the pine sharpness. It was impossible. Nothing bloomed in winter. Yet there it was, teasing her senses like a ghost from warmer days. Persimmon. She shook her head. Persimmons ripened in autumn, their orange globes hanging like ornaments. But here, in this frozen hell, curiosity overrode caution. She followed the aroma, weaving through denser thickets where the snow was shallower, protected by the canopy. The trees grew sparser, opening into a small clearing she didn't recall from her maps. And there, rising like a sentinel from the snow, stood the giant persimmon tree. It was enormous, its trunk thicker than 3 men could encircle, bark gnarled and ancient, twisting upward in defiance of the season. Branches spread wide, heavy with fruit, ripe, plump persimmons glowing orange against the white backdrop. Snow dusted their skins, but they hung untouched, as if preserved by some miracle. Elena stared, breath caught in her throat. How? Persimmon trees didn't thrive this far north, and certainly not in winter. This one must have been centuries old, a freak of nature, its roots tapping into some hidden spring that kept it alive. Tentatively, she approached, boots sinking into the softer ground around its base. The scent was stronger now, rich and tangy, promising nourishment. She reached up, plucking a low-hanging fruit. It was firm, not frozen solid like she expected. Biting in, juice exploded on her tongue, sweet with a hint of astringency that made her mouth pucker, but it was food. Real, life-giving food. She devoured it, seeds and all, the warmth spreading through her body like a fire kindled anew. Laughter bubbled up, unexpected and raw. Alone in the wilderness, she had found salvation. But the tree was more than a source of fruit. As she circled it, she noticed peculiarities. The ground beneath was warmer, snow melting in patches to reveal mossy earth. A small hollow at the base, partially hidden by roots, suggested shelter. Elena knelt, peering inside. It was a natural cave, formed by the tree's massive roots arching over a depression in the soil. Warm air wafted out, geothermal. Perhaps a hot spring bubbled deep below, feeding the tree and creating this micro-oasis. She crawled in, the space just big enough for her to curl up. The walls were dry, insulated by the wood, and the temperature was bearable, almost comfortable compared to her cabin. That night, she decided to stay. Dragging supplies from the cabin would take effort, but the tree offered everything: food from its branches, shelter in its roots, and even water if she melted snow over a small fire. She built a lean-to extension to the hollow using branches and snow for walls, packing it tight for insulation. The persimmons sustained her, dozens upon dozens, enough to last weeks if rationed. She learned to eat them ripe, avoiding the unripe ones that puckered too fiercely. In the days that followed, Elena's routine shifted from desperate survival to cautious thriving. Mornings began with harvesting fruit, her hands stained orange from the juice. She experimented, mashing them into a paste to dry by the fire, creating a crude jam that added flavor to her meager stores. The tree's leaves, though sparse in winter, provided tinder when dried. She whittled tools from fallen branches: a spear for fishing if the nearby stream thawed, a bowl for collecting sap that oozed from minor cuts in the bark. The sap was sticky, almost medicinal, and she used it to seal wounds on her chapped skin. Loneliness lingered, though. Nights were the hardest, the forest alive with distant howls of wolves or the crack of ice shifting. She talked to herself, recounting stories from her life: growing up in a bustling city, escaping to the mountains for peace, the failed relationships that left her preferring solitude. But now, isolation weighed heavy. The tree became her silent companion. She named it Percy, whispering thanks as she picked its bounty. In her mind, it was alive in a deeper way, its presence a guardian against the winter's cruelty. One evening, as dusk painted the sky in bruised purples, a storm rolled in again. Wind screamed, snow piling high. Elena huddled in the root cave, fire flickering from a pit she dug. The tree groaned under the assault, branches whipping, but it held firm. Fruit thudded to the ground outside, buried quickly, but she had stockpiled enough inside. Through the night, she pondered the tree's origins. Was it a relic from a warmer era, when these mountains were lush? Or planted by indigenous peoples long ago, a sacred site forgotten? She recalled legends from her ranger days, tales of spirit trees that protected wanderers. Superstition, she thought, but in the heart of winter, belief was a warm blanket. As weeks turned to months, Elena's body adapted. She grew leaner, stronger from daily labors. She explored farther, marking trails with notches in bark, always returning to Percy. One day, she found animal tracks, deer, perhaps drawn to the tree's warmth like her. She set snares, catching a rabbit that provided fresh meat, its fur lining her boots. The persimmons never seemed to dwindle. New ones ripened as others fell, defying biology. Magic, or just the tree's resilience, its deep roots, pulling nutrients from unfrozen depths. But survival wasn't without trials. A fever struck one week, chills racking her despite the shelter. She brewed tea from persimmon leaves, recalling vague herbal knowledge. They were astringent, perhaps anti-inflammatory. It helped, or maybe it was placebo, but she recovered. Another time, a bear lumbered near, attracted by the scent. Elena froze in the hollow, heart pounding, as it sniffed the air and moved on, uninterested in the frozen fruit. Spring's whisper came subtly. Birdsong in the mornings, drips from melting icicles. The snow receded, revealing green shoots around the tree. Elena felt a pang. Soon the pass would clear, rescuers might come, or she could hike out. But leaving Percy felt like betrayal. This giant had saved her, not just physically but spiritually, teaching her that solitude could nurture if embraced. On the day she decided to venture back, the sun shone bright. She packed persimmons, sap sealed in bark pouches, and left a carving on the trunk, a simple figure, arms raised in gratitude. The hike to civilization was arduous, but her strengthened body carried her through. Emerging from the woods, she flagged down a ranger truck. They stared in disbelief. She had been presumed lost in the blizzard. News spread. The lone survivor, sustained by a miraculous tree. Scientists came later, studying the giant persimmon, confirming its anomaly. A geothermal vent below kept it thriving year-round. But Elena knew it was more. In interviews, she spoke of resilience, how nature provides if you listen. She returned often, planting saplings nearby, ensuring the legacy. Years passed. Elena wrote a book, her story inspiring others facing their winters, literal or metaphorical. The tree stood tall, a beacon for the lost. And in quiet moments, she wondered if it had found her. not the other way around. Survival, she realized, was about connection, even in isolation. The giant persimmon in the snow had taught her that.